My name is Angela Shambarger, and I am the Judicial Coordinator for campus, which means, as my son said when he was in school, my mom helps kids who make bad choices. And I do. I really try to help students do well while they're here. But one of the other hats that I wear, if you can see under my title here, is I'm a Title IX investigator. Ooh. Kind of creepy. But my job here, and one of the things that orientation always has me come and do for folks, in fact, I'm doing the same presentation on the other campus later today and 2 or 3 times tomorrow as well for other student groups, is to help students understand a little bit more about what Title IX is and your roles and responsibilities while you're here at University of New England. And so I promise we'll be focused, 45 minutes. Okay, so how many of you have heard about Title IX before? Raise your hands. Okay, a few of you. So most of you probably never heard of it. How many of you who have heard of it have heard about it in the context of like athletics? Okay. When I was in school, that's all Title IX was. That was my world. It was about athletics. It was the fact that I could play field hockey in high school because we had a football team. So that was equal access to education for both boys and girls in education. But it really is so much more than that. Title IX is part of the Educational Amendments of 1972, which protects people from discrimination based on sex and educational programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance. And the University of New England and most of the schools that you went to in K-12 and any other school you might move on to after here, if you go to graduate school, receive some sort of federal financial assistance. It's a regulation that describes the conduct that violates Title IX, which includes sexual harassment, the failure to provide equal opportunity athletics, discrimination based on pregnancy. That's a newer understanding over the past few years. And then to enforce Title IX, the U.S. Department of Education maintains Office for Civil Rights with headquarters in Washington, D.C. and 12 other offices across the United States. And my office that I report to if I have a problem is in Boston. The Department of Education is an outstanding website, which is a great resource for people, and that's the Title IX and sex discrimination. Again, it's not just about athletics. What it's about, it's pervasive discrimination, harassment, and creating a situation or environment that interferes with the individual's work or educational performance, creates an intimidating or hostile learning environment, or interferes with or limits someone's ability to participate in or benefit from an educational program or activity. And at an institution of higher education, a college or university, that's particularly important to understand because when you were in high school, you got up in the morning at home, you went to school, you went to practice, you went to work someplace else, maybe downtown or someplace else at a mall, and then you got to come home again. But if something happened at your school or while you're on the athletic field that falls under Title IX, had to do with sexual harassment or discrimination, oftentimes it was really isolated to those environments. It could still be debilitating and get in the way of you succeeding in academics. But when you're here at the institution, you eat, sleep, study. Your whole life is right here with all the same people every day, all day, on the weekends, at night, and early in the morning. So if something is stressful or bothersome or there's some sort of discriminating environment that you're in, like in the lab, the same people you're with in lab are probably in your residence hall. You might eat with them in the cafeteria or you play against them on the field in intramurals. So that pervasiveness really is all throughout your experience here. So we have to pay extra super care to make sure that we are addressing situations when they come up because we understand how debilitating they are or potentially could be. Sexual misconduct falls under Title IX and includes assault, rape, battery, coercion, touching, suggestive actions, comments, or degrading jokes, threats, and more. And we're going to break down these two things to make them more understandable throughout the presentation. But what I really want folks to understand is the difference between pervasiveness and when someone makes one comment to you, it's probably not a pervasive sexual, it's not an appropriate comment, but it's not necessarily pervasiveness. And we'll talk about the difference between those things as well. And down here towards the bottom, I work with college students for about 20 years now, and a lot of the times when I see harassment and misconduct, it's often unintentional. We all come from different backgrounds, and we're all here to meet new people and get to know folks, and sometimes we put ourselves out there. And the difference when we talk about sexual harassment, it's not about the intent of the person. It's about how the other person receives the behavior, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And Title IX has been in the news a lot over the past few years. On the media has covered it a lot. Last year, Vice President Biden coordinated a White House task force specifically about rape on college campuses, and they came up with the Not Alone report, and it's online at notalone.gov, and that's an excellent resource for colleges, university students, and their families. So I go there. I love it. It's a great place for me to look for information and resources for the work I do as well. I want to talk a little bit about sexual harassment, okay? And this is where most of the work interactions I have with Title IX live, sexual harassment, because we're lots of people, we're lots of different attitudes and behaviors. And again, it's a behavior of a person of either sex defined as unwelcome. And it could include sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. Now, I just want to break that down. Sometimes the behavior is welcome, right? The 2 people, 3 people, whoever's interacting with that, it's something that they do with each other. It's a consensual kind of thing where they kind of joke that way. And so it's pretty comfortable with one another. You know that you have close friends where you have certain types of behavior that are comfortable with one another, but it's the unwelcomeness of it, all right? And what happens sometimes, especially in residence halls, is you all are tight. Within the next 2 or 3 days, you all are going to be best buds and you're planning your weddings together, what you're going to do in 20 years, and how you're going to plan your spring break already, because you really like each other, and you want to become really good friends. You all live together. But what happens is it's really hard when you're trying to fit into a group to talk about what makes you feel uncomfortable, because you don't want to be that person who's the weird one who's on the outside, right? Or you could have a floor of people who are really tight and engaging and perhaps telling inappropriate jokes, doing inappropriate activity that might be offensive to other folks, but it's all consensual around within that group, but they're on the second floor and you have to walk through that to get to the TV lounge. All right? So sometimes it's not the people directly involved in the behavior, it's someone who has to experience it from the outside. Okay, does that make sense? Like in a lab situation or a work study situation, the people can be talking to each other or sharing a video online constantly, or they're interacting with one another, and they're not necessarily addressing this other student over here, but she or he needs to see it every day, and it can become a hostile environment for them. Okay? So that's when I talk about unwelcomeness. Sexual advances and requests for sexual favors. When you see the media and movies, you hear about work situations where someone might say, if you do this for me, will you do this for me? Let's do this, around the sexual nature, or they move in, they stretch their arm around, all those little things, the shoulder rubs, the massages that kind of start to cross those lines and start to feel a little icky, or any other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. When those things or submission to such conduct is made implicitly or explicitly a term or condition of employment or academic status. When people think about sexual harassment, this is kind of where their brains automatically go in the stereotype, where we think of a boss or a faculty member who says, David, if you do this for me, then you will ace that test. If you do X, Y, and Z, then I'll make sure you get that internship you really want to get at the bank downtown. So it's all about, if you do this for me, then I'll make sure you get what you want, okay? Sometimes it's not really explicit. Sometimes you know what you need to do to get what you want. If you want me to help you out, you know what you need to do. So they may not always spell it out. And when that conduct interferes with their educational experience or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive learning, working, or living environment, okay? What does that look like? Again, I've been doing this job a long time, and what that can look like is the person who hangs out in her room every day and doesn't go to lunch, doesn't leave, can't make it to her 8 a.m. class because she knows she needs to walk by those 2 other rooms on the way, and every time she walks by, they're going to make sexual comments about her, make fun of her, or all those sorts of things. So it becomes, she can't leave her room, right? Or it's the person in lab. You all have lab partners. You sit at a lab table together. You work together. You have your exact partner, and then you have 2 other people you may work with. And one of them, or 2 of them, or all of them are constantly on you about either something about you sexually, making fun of you because of your gender, or your sexual orientation, or any of those things. So you can't even think about going to lab because you just know you have to deal with it every day, and you're so tired of dealing with it, so you don't go to lab. How many of you need a lab to graduate or succeed in your major? A lot of those labs may only be offered once a semester. So what happens if you don't go to lab? Does that get in the way of your success, your academic opportunities? Absolutely. So those are just some examples. We'll talk about them in more specifics in a minute. But Title IX at the University of New England applies to all employees, all students on campus. How many of you are in majors where you might work at a clinical site or do an internship off campus? A lot of you, right? Because that's the type of student we have here. And most of your majors, it's a requirement. So when you go to those places, it applies to you there. Not so both in your behavior, but also what happens to you, so we can take care of you. I do a training with COM, College of Osteopathic Medicine. All of their clinical site supervisors get to see me do a similar presentation, so they know what our obligation and responsibility is to take care of our students, so they need to, and what they need to know to take care of their sites. It also, how many of you think you might do a study abroad experience? Whether it's a semester or one of the travel courses. A lot of you, right? So if something were to happen while you're engaged in that experience, the policy covers you both for your responsibility and also our responsibility to take care of you. I have flown people to Tangier to help investigate a situation or to take care of a student. I've flown people to New York City and Florida. Or any location affiliated with the university academic program of a student. So say we have a field trip that goes someplace and something happens, we will try to help take care of you there, whether it's between our students or between our students and somebody else. Questions about any of that? Okay. These are some real life examples. Names have been changed a little bit. At a work study job, Mark was frequently subjected by his boss to jokes with sexual overtones. That happen? I've seen that happen in my workplace when I was a student or now as a grown-up. Those things happen. Sometimes they're welcome and it's that kind of environment, but sometimes you got to be careful and check it out, okay? A resident in Mary's residence hall, Sue, persists in coming on to her. Sue continues to stare at Mary and touches her hair and body. Okay, so I've noticed sometimes with college students, the more comfortable they are with each other, they do a lot of touching. You know, I want to hug her, or I like to give massages. You know, I hear that all the time. And sometimes that's fine, but sometimes, depending on the person who's receiving that behavior, it can be off-putting or make them feel uncomfortable. Doesn't mean that Sue is trying to harass her. It just means Sue just might really like Mary and want to be her friend, and that's just how she's used to interacting with her friends. But Mary might be a little uncomfortable by that. In one of Rachel's classes, the professor makes derogatory comments and jokes about women. Rachel finds these comments insulting and is tempted to drop the course. She feels like a second-class citizen in her course. And again, what if this is a course or a class that's only ever taught by this faculty member and she needs it to graduate? Could that be getting in her way of educational opportunity? Absolutely. Jim has been approached repeatedly by Bob for a date when they are alone in the lab, and Jim made it clear that he was not interested. Bob continues to bother Jim, and Jim is afraid to tell anyone for fear they might wonder about him. We have a lot of same-gender harassment claims that come up, and partly that's because students feel really uncomfortable trying to address it when it makes them feel uncomfortable, because it's hard, regardless of what your sexual orientation is, because people are worried about assumptions that folks make, especially when they're in a new place, what that might mean for them, or if they are going through a coming out process of their own, they don't want to out themselves early on or don't want people to make assumptions about their relationship with someone else. So it's particularly hard when you have same-gender complaints. This one also happens. We get one every couple years. We have a lot of folks who are on our campuses, both here and in Portland, for those of you who are going to go up to Portland, where we have people who don't belong to the university who are here as research subjects in the pain lab, or they're here for the dental hygiene lab, or to work with our comp students, or they're body-wise folks. Those are the community members who use the fitness center or do cardiac rehab with some of our students. So they aren't university people, okay? But they interact with our students a lot. And sometimes they're not familiar with what's acceptable on our campus, and so they're inappropriate or really in a gray zone with our students, and our students start to feel really uncomfortable about the attention, but they don't know what to do because this is not a university person. We absolutely can help them, and we do it all the time. Sometimes it's a conversation with that person, or sometimes that person's uninvited to come back to campus. So, but it's really important with all of these that we help get the information to folks as it comes up. I want to talk a little bit about sexual misconduct. My 14-year-old, when he was 12, sat in the back of one of these presentations because I had to pick him up from summer camp, and he was mortified while he goes, "Mom, you were talking about sex." I'm like, "I know, honey, I'm sorry. I do that. That's my job." And now he had puberty class. We talk about sex all the time, so I'm really, I'm sorry if it makes folks feel uncomfortable. It's really important that I break these things down for folks. So we talked about sexual harassment. Sexual misconduct also includes non-consensual sexual contact, non-consensual sexual intercourse, sexual exploitation. What do you think sexual exploitation is? Anyone want to give me an answer? We are seeing a resurgence of sexual exploitation in the sending of pictures. All of you have pocket computers that sometimes function as telephones, but they are also video cameras, and sometimes photos and videos are taken consensually. Sometimes they're taken without folks even knowing, and sometimes those videos can be used as leverage. You do what I want, or I will use this. I will post it on Yik Yak. I will post it on Facebook. I will put it out there in the world for everyone to see you or us. Sometimes it's explicit, and sometimes it's just put out there, okay? So that's exploitation. Also processed in this area are stalking. Everyone knows what stalking looks like, right? We'll talk about it a little bit, but it's that constant attention that's not wanted, right? They know where you are, and again, those little computers in your back pocket know where you are. And depending on what settings you have, it's easy for everyone else to know where you are too, right? So they're little tools for stalkers too. So when you look at your security settings, make sure you're putting out there what you want out there about yourself, okay? It's checking on you all the time, meeting you outside of class, work study, your residence hall room all the time, calling you all the time. We have had some incidents of stalking, but it's more, over the past few years, it's less with internal community members, and sometimes it's an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend that the student has left behind at home who keeps coming back, okay? And we have ways of protecting our students, but you just need to let us know that there's a problem, okay? Some hazing activities that when they involve gender and sexual activity. We don't see a lot of that here because we don't have certain groups that tend to live in hazing worlds. Dating violence and domestic violence. Domestic violence is when there's been people have had an intimate relationship at some point and they live together. Okay, so they could currently be roommates or suite mates or apartment mates and have had, even if they're not currently in an intimate relationship, could have had one in the past. And then dating violence is when they have a current or a past intimate relationship, but they don't live together. Does that make sense? And there's some level of violence. And the little asterisk underneath says it's part of the Violence Against Women's Act that came out a few years ago. Consent. We're going to spend a little bit of time here because a lot of the time when I have reports or I'm meeting with students, it's because people misunderstood what consent was, okay? What is consent? I got it up there, but anyone want to give me an example of consent? Anything? Anyone? Saying yes, right. Consent is clear. It's knowing. It's voluntary. You can't force someone to say yes, okay? Then there's not consent. It's active, not passive, okay? So they're actively engaged in the activity. They're not just laying there, okay? There's a difference. You got the difference, okay? Or sitting there or whatever. Silence cannot be interpreted as consent. I don't know how many times I've sat down and talked to someone. I said, well, how did you know they wanted to do it? Well, they didn't say no. Well, what did they say? Well, they didn't say anything. Well, how did you know you had consent? They didn't say no. I'm like, no. That doesn't work that way. So silence cannot be interpreted as consent. Okay, consent can be given by words or actions so long as it is mutually understandable, clear permission regarding willingness to engage in and the conditions of sexual activity. So they're really into it. It's obvious that they're reciprocating, okay? They're not being passive. I'm not going to spell it all out for you because this is a PG presentation. Consent to one activity does not imply consent to any other activity. What does that mean? So say, again, I got little kids, right? So we do Little League. You start out at first base, right? And that's okay. You can move to second base, start to go around, but doesn't mean you're going to get to go all the way home or even to third base, right? So consent to one thing does not mean anything else along that continuum or anywhere else. Consent to prior activities cannot imply consent to future activity. Just because you may have had some sort of intimate encounter with someone at some point in the past does not give you permission to do it any other time in the future, okay? Just because you have a history does not mean you get to have a present or a future. All right. And this one's kind of weird for folks. They look at me like, huh? Consent, the individual giving consent must be of legal age. In the state of Maine, that's 15. All right. Most of our students are over 15. You all are mostly over 15. I'm looking around the room. But those of you who were here this summer, look at my orientation leaders. We had a lot of kids here for sports camps. Some of you may have been to sports camps. We have students that come for field trips who do kids swim in the campus center. If you're going to be a lifeguard or work in the campus center or in the forum, you might see kids coming to do programs in those facilities. I don't know if any of you followed the Penn State Sandusky case from a couple years ago. That involved minors that were on a campus. Okay, so if you see or hear about something that that involves little kids, that's not okay. You need to let someone know. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Living with consent some more. Incapacitation, all right? So going back to that passivity around consent, sexual activity with someone who one should know to be mentally or physically incapacitated, unable to make rational, reasonable decisions because they lack the capacity, okay? They don't know the who, what, when, why, or how of what's going on around them, all right? So they need to watch out for that. Incapacitation, what causes incapacitation? Katie? Alcohol, what else? Drugs are on the board. What else? Oh, lack of sleep, severe lack of sleep, because sometimes college students will go days without really sleeping. But medication, a lot of students are on medication, okay? For a long term or even for short term, like they're sick with something and they're on medication and then they drink alcohol or try some sort of drug or someone gives them a drug that they're not aware of, and it increases their incapacitation and actually speeds it up sometimes, okay? Sometimes mental disability. I've been doing this for a long time. So involuntary physical restraints, not okay, all right? They need to be wanting to do that. And rape drugs. In the state of Maine, we're seeing more of those happen, okay? So when you look at alcohol education and safe drinking practices and those sorts of things, we really recommend you got to be careful with what people put in your drinks or make sure you're safe because it happens. We've had students come back from being off campus saying, I don't remember anything that happened to me. It happens, okay? Alcohol or drug use will not be accepted as an excuse for violating another person, okay? So I don't care how drunk they were, if they hurt you, that's not okay. Understand? Nod your heads? Okay. But people are here, you're adults, you're getting to know folks, and there may be some times where it is okay, right? How do you let someone know it's okay? So, if you are the initiator, how do you get consent? What do you need to do? It's a great way. Ask, is this okay? You like this? Are we okay? Do you want to? And remember, I said one thing doesn't mean everything else gets to happen. So continue to check in as it unfolds. Are you still okay? Are we good? Should we try something different? Is this okay? Don't make assumptions. This is my favorite because I see this a lot, okay? Because we live in a culture where we don't let ourselves say no. We discourage it, okay? Because it's mean. It means you're a bitch, you're rude. It's hard, you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. So sometimes we make excuses and we're not really clear, but we're still saying no, all right? So if you get any of those mixed messages, like you're trying to be super romantic and in the moment, and she's like, well, you know, I really got to go wash my book bag. Maybe this, honest to God, I've heard that excuse. Not personally, but I've heard it in part of the story. Or I got to go to practice. You know, my roommate might be back in like an hour. Or, you know, like when you start hearing the excuses, and they're no, that's a signal, okay? Because you should double check what that means, all right? Don't take advantage of someone's intoxicated state, even if you think they did it to themselves. I'm not going to unpackage all the rape mythology that's out there, but if someone has been drinking and you think is not capacitated, or you don't get involved with it, okay? If you really like this person or you really want to have an intimate encounter with them, wait until they can say yes to you, all right? I don't care if you think they did it to themselves. It doesn't matter. Remember, I said doesn't matter. And again, silence. Do we have consent when we have silence? No. If you are on the receiving end of the attention, okay? Now I know as we go through these, there are times when none of these could be an option for whatever reason, personal safety, past trauma, whatever, okay? And I get that. And I never want anyone to blame themselves because they weren't able to do any of the things on this list or any other list we can come up with, okay? But if you're in a space where you are into the situation or are not into the situation and you feel safe enough to do any of these things, I want you to know you can, okay? I'm giving you permission to say no, all right? So if you are the receiver of the attention, clearly let them know what they're doing is okay. Heck yeah, this is awesome. Woo! Yes, let's do this, all right? Tell your partner, so that's pretty obvious. That would be a good example of consent, all right? Tell your partner if you want to stop or what your limits are before you get going. Yeah, you know, yeah, I really like you and I really want to do this, but I only feel comfortable up to this point, okay? After that, let's talk some more. Or clearly say no, all right? If something makes you feel uncomfortable, no, N-O, you can say it. But again, like I said, I know there are times when none of these things work for folks because of personal, emotional, and physical safety. I get that. If you can leave the situation, try to do that. That's okay, all right? Or ask someone else for help. And we're going to talk about how to do some of those things in a minute, but I want to let folks know that it's okay to say yes, and it's okay to say no. Saying yes does not mean you're loose with your morals. It just means you are a consenting adult. Saying no does not mean you're a mean person. It just means you're taking care of yourself, okay? Force, okay? Some of this might be self-explanatory, but I feel like we need to talk about it just to be clear. The use of physical violence and or imposing on someone physically to gain sexual access, all right? Force. It includes threats, do this for me or to me or else. Intimidation. Well, you know what's going to happen if you don't do it. It's that intimidation. I didn't say exactly what was going to happen, but you know something bad's going to happen. Coercion. Pressure unreasonably for sex. What does that mean? I say that, people nod their heads, but no one knows what it means. What does coercion mean? Yeah, that constant pressure. How many of you have heard the song came out a couple years ago, Blurred Lines by Robin Thicke? That is like, I love, you know, the first time I heard the song, very catchy and bouncing with it. It is the creepiest song ever when a 6-year-old sings it, okay? You're a good girl, you know you want it. And it's a constant pressure, okay? The song is all about coercion. And again, seriously, creepy. You walk into daycare to pick up your kids and they're all singing it there in the lobby. With their little xylophones. So college is stressful, right? You got pressure from home, you got pressure on yourself, you got pressure from your faculty. You want to do well, you've got this new relationship or an older relationship and you don't want to disappoint them too, and it's constant pressure to perform, okay? And that can break someone down. Doesn't mean that they actually want to do it, but they have just reached their limit. Okay, it's not okay. Okay. So we try to create a situation where people understand what's happening and they can make informed choices and they can be supportive of one another, but that doesn't mean things don't happen, all right? What if something happens to you that falls under this umbrella of stuff? Let someone know you're not alone and there are many options. My ESP sucks, okay? I want to help you, but if I don't know that something's happened, I can't telepathically know that. So we have lots of reporting options. And some of them are more confidential than others, okay? So we really want folks to feel safe talking to someone. On both campuses, for those of you who find yourselves on the Portland campus, we have the same services there as we have here. Confidential reporting, counseling services, and off-campus hotlines. We have folks on both campuses who are trained victims advocates who have expertise and lots of experience in working with folks and helping them manage this. We have a Title IX coordinator and deputy coordinators. We have safety and security. We have folks who work with me in student affairs, student health care. We have a lot of local advocacy services, sexual assault response services of Southern Maine, we call them SARSM, or Caring Unlimited and some others. We have hospital, police, and I have a lot of students, particularly first and second year students because they're a little bit younger and they know we have strict alcohol policies that don't report or worried about reporting because they're underage and they were drinking too. What do you think I'm going to care more about, the fact that they were assaulted or the fact that they had some beer? The assaulted. I don't care about the alcohol. I want to make sure you're safe, all right? And that's written right into our policies, and anyone you work with in this process is going to feel the same way. All right, so I want you all to feel safe reporting. Reporting and resources, again, information can and will be kept as private as possible. The only guaranteed confidential is going to be those counseling services or those off-campus services. But if you work with a Title IX staff like myself, or security, or the Title IX deputies or coordinators, we'll keep it private, but sometimes we need to think about the 3,000 other students on campus to make sure that we're making safe decisions. So sometimes we'll talk about that. We honor the reporter's wishes as much as we can. If a student comes to me and says, this is what's happened to me, I just want the behavior to stop, I'm tired of going to lab and this happening, we have the options so that they don't get outed and they don't become the person that's named in a complaint. We have other options called no contact orders. Those are kind of like on-campus restraining orders, okay? So we can manage how people interact on campus, and we do them for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes roommate situations gone bad ex-girlfriend, boyfriend situations, or sometimes when we have harassment and other things. They can be permanent, they can be temporary. So, but again, we can control how folks interact. I've had lots of situations where a student has come to me and says, I am tired. I deal with this every day, and he or she will explain everything they've been going through. But the problem is, this is my friend. and he's just not understanding or not taking me seriously, thinks I'm joking when I ask him to stop. I need help making him understand. So we'll do mediation sometimes, and that's really helpful because most people don't want to think that they've hurt someone else. Again, most of the stuff is unintentional, all right? So there's a little asterisk next to mediation because mediation is never a resolution for reports of sexual violence, okay? I'm never going to put someone who's a survivor of sexual violence in the same room with the person who assaulted them, ever, okay? Even if you go through a formal hearing process, there's ways that we keep you separate so you don't have to interact with one another. I refer everyone who comes to the process to make sure they're getting counseling because even if you're the person who's been accused of a behavior, it's pretty traumatic because like I said, no one wants to think they hurt someone else, right? I don't want to think I hurt someone else, especially if I didn't mean to. So it can be really hard to deal with. So I make sure people have access to counseling. Sometimes we shift people's classes around, their rooming situations around. If they have an internship, we change their schedule a little bit. We have lots of options to keep a person who's reporting this safer and to make sure that their wishes are being honored. And sometimes we do nothing because sometimes someone just wants us to know that it happened and they really don't want us to do anything. They just want us to know it happened. And sometimes we can do that. We've talked about NCOs, mediations. Sometimes I will meet with a student in a work study situation because I've got reports, and oftentimes it's not isolated reports because if someone's making bad choices, they make bad choices with everybody and not just with one person. And so we'll talk to them and clarify our expectations. Oftentimes they'll deny that they did it. Sometimes say, oh, yeah, I guess I didn't understand how that was going to impact folks. And we just clarify our expectations and we say, you know, we're receiving reports that these things are happening. And like, oh, I didn't do that. I'm like, well, I don't care if you need to know what my expectations are, and this is what's going to happen if I get more reports. Sometimes we do a lot of programming. In fact, all the time we do a lot of programming. There's a program tomorrow night called Sex Signals. There's something called the Sex Show next month. And we have a lot of bulletin boards and other things to try to give students information to take care of each other and make good choices. Sometimes if there's something that's happened on campus, you might see something called a campus alert. We don't do a lot of those, but sometimes we have to. And what'll happen is when you go on to UOnline to check on your class schedule, they'll ask you for emergency contact information. That'll go, so when there's an emergency on campus, we'll text, email, phone you, however you want to be alerted to let you know that there's a danger on campus. Bystanders. Who knows what a bystander is? Anyone? Someone who's there and watches, who's not necessarily directly involved, right? Excellent. Most incidents involve at least one bystander along the continuum, okay? So someone who's witnessing it, someone who's overhearing a conversation about someone who's talking to a friend, or is talking about a plan. Someone knows something or sees something, but we don't always know what to do, right? Because we're not sure what we can do or how we feel about it. It's really important that bystanders understand their own obstacles to acting. We all have obstacles. I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I'm a staff member of the institution where it's been my job to intervene in everything, and there are still times where I find I have an obstacle. And I need to think about what that is, okay? I know most of you have taken Haven, and a lot of what Haven is about is helping you figure out what your obstacles are to doing something. So what some of the obstacles could be, what if I get in trouble because I was at the party and I was drinking too? Remember when I talk about those things that are important to me? I want to make sure people are safe. We'll deal with drinking another time, okay? Look out for your friends. We call this place the UNE family for a reason, all right? If something's happening to your sister, you're not going to let it happen. You're going to do something. Same thing for your folks here, all right? Help them get out of their, or avoid dangerous situations or not be the cause of something unfortunate. Educate yourself on what actions you might see could be a problem. I work with staff and also students a lot about what's the difference between a brand new relationship and a stalking situation. Because, you know, how many of you have been in those situations where you're so in love and you text each other all the time and you call each other all the time and you only ever want to be together? Katie's raising her hand. I've been there, okay? But sometimes, at what point is that different than the situation where someone's texted you all the time, calling you all the time, spending all his or her time with you, but doesn't let you do it with anybody else? Gets mad when you text or talk to anyone else. So sometimes there's a fine line when you're the outsider to try and figure out what's a crazy, exciting new relationship or something that's a little creepier, right? So sometimes we need to watch or ask questions. I'm nosy and I have no shame, so sometimes I'll just ask them, like, hey, how do you feel about that? Because I'm a little worried. Let's see. I like to break down, and those of you who are interested in being trained bystanders, I break it down into 3 things. There's the direct method, where, like I said, I'm that friend. Direct, hey, can I help you? Or you need to stop that behavior. Okay, so just getting yourself involved. But sometimes, you know, I'm only 5'4". Most people in the world are bigger than me, so sometimes that's not the option I want to take. Distract. I love the distract method. I talk and work with students all the time around the distract method, and those little cell phone back pocket computers make this so easy. I worked with a student who was in a Greek situation at another campus, and he was a little uncomfortable because a member of his fraternity, who was a more senior member, looked like he might be engaging in something that could be problematic for another person, but he didn't feel like he had the social capital or cachet to say something, so he went up and said, "Dude, don't you have like a blue Ford Ranger pickup truck?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." He goes, "They're towing it right now." He left, and they got the girl out of the situation, and something bad probably was avoided. Or cat videos. Love cat videos. Hey, look at this cute little picture. You know, people are always showing videos on their phone. Have you seen this? Have you done this? So people hanging each other. So distracting, stopping the momentum that's been created. Or delegate. We all have that super annoying friend. Or they're usually your awesome friend, but they have no shame. They're really extroverted, and they will intervene in any situation. So, hey, I'm worried about this. Can you go get so-and-so because I don't like the way so-and-so is looking at her? And they'll go and intervene. Or you can go find an RA, an area coordinator, a security person, or anyone else you feel has some ability that might be better than yours to intervene. Sometimes when we delegate, it's after the fact because we've talked to our roommate late at night and they've told us something that happened. We're like, I think we need to talk to someone. But again, sometimes it's in the moment as well. All right? Questions about those? I never want anyone to put themselves in this unsafe situation, but you have some tools in your toolbox. Okay? UNE does a lot to try to educate students. You get to hang out with people like me on days like today and to make sure folks are clear about what's going on. We have lots of brochures and posters you'll see around campus, and you'll see at different events on campus. You'll see bulletin boards on campus talking about some of these topics. We train our staff. I spent most of last week training staff. We have lots of policies that are here to protect our students. We do things like Haven, which is a program you do before you even come to campus. And then we have a task force of Title IX staff who actually look at this. We meet about once a month, and we look at what's happening on campus, how we could do things better, and what are we missing. So we want you all to have what you need and the tools to be successful. We also are rolling out something this year that we're really, really excited about. It's something called the Green Dot Initiative. Remember I talked about the 3 Ds of bystander intervention? It's really based on the Green Dot model where we really look at an environmental impact. So if you are interested in sexual assault or sexual violence prevention and want to find out more about it, we will be doing a lot with Green Dot. Big rollout in October. I'm doing a whole training with student leaders next Sunday. So you can see an orientation leader or myself if this is something you're interested in. But you'll see a lot of things around campus that are green in the next couple months, so we'll talk more about it. I mentioned the Title IX staff. Ray Handy is Assistant Dean of Students for Portland and Professional Student Affairs on the other campus, so those of you who are going up to the other campus for graduate or professional phase. Ed Doyle, who's the Associate Director of Human Resources. Joan Howard, those of you who are athletes will see Joan a lot in your career here, and she manages some of the NCAA requirements, but also manages the Title IX that we've been talking about today. Sharon Bollier is our Title IX coordinator. She oversees the whole thing to make sure that we're not missing anything and we're being consistent, all right? Again, we talked about the confidential reporting. Jackie Sweat on this campus, she's fantastic. And then Ann Barton on the other campus, who's also very cool. And then we talked about Sexual Response Services of Southern Maine and Caring Unlimited 24 hotline, and call those folks, and again, that's confidential. And sometimes people call a confidential resource just to kind of walk something through and kind of figure out what their options are before they're ready to talk to someone they're not sure about. SARS will be at the presentation tomorrow night. And now I have a brief video I would like to share with you. So I love using that video by Rockstar Dinosaur Pirate Princess. She's fantastic. But again, it's pretty obvious. We changed the context a little bit. We wouldn't do this in any other situation, right? But for some reason, sometimes we think the rules change when we're talking about sex, all right? You don't just have to be passed out to not be able to give consent. Sometimes you have those really intoxicated or altered people, and so consent falls there too. So thank you so much for being such an outstanding audience, and I think the orientation leaders have a task for you. So actually, I'm not the last thing before lunch. Yes. So thank you. My office is in DeCary Hall, right upstairs next to the fish tank. So if you ever have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me. Area coordinators, RAs, orientation leaders can definitely get you in touch with me. So thank you. Good luck to